because you have to remember, right? Like, what?
What were you doing?
It doesn't matter, all right? It doesn't matter. There's little shit uneven on my desk, and I'm fixing it. God, cut this in post.
Cut this in post.
Hello, De Niro Nation, and welcome to Our Hero De Niro. I am Mike, joined as ever by my co-host, Mike.
No relation.
No relation. And this week, we will be discussing Barry Levinson's 1996 film, Sleepers, starring Robert De Niro. Mike, had you ever heard of this film before we rolled it?
Definitely not. 1996, no.
Nor had I. Yeah, it's fascinating because I was really surprised reading about this film. I think we remarked upon this in the recording of us rolling it. This was a huge box office hit, and somehow I never heard of this movie, even though it came out when I was 8 or 9 years old. And it's got a crazy cast. It's really weird that we never heard of this movie. It's got Brad Pitt in it, Kevin Bacon, Robert De Niro, Minnie Driver. There's a lot of people in this movie, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating historical relic from 1996, and we are going to discuss it today.
That is why we're here.
Yep. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about before we just get right into discussing this film?
No, just the realization that you had last week when we rolled it that Barry Levinson is also the director of The Alto Nights that we watched earlier this year, the newest Robert De Niro film. So I am excited to kind of think about this film in the context of his larger filmography and kind of how he's changed as a director.
Yeah. It's really fascinating how much better this is than The Alto Nights.
That's pretty much it, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Not a hot take. You could like this movie or you could not like this movie. It's pretty obviously objectively good in a lot of ways. And I don't think The Alto Nights is objectively good in really very many ways at all. It's not a very good film.
There was one other thing I wanted to say. I don't know if this is the right place to do it, but you and I, we hung out yesterday and we talked about our previous episode on The Fan, and we both expressed that we felt we were a little too harsh on that film. I was thinking I might increase my rating of that film from 3 to 3.5 stars. Yeah. Would you join me in that? How do you feel about that?
I would, definitely. Yeah. Honestly, yes. And we did not talk about this beforehand. But I think the beginning of the next episode is a great time to do revised ratings for a film from the previous episode if we want to. Yeah, you and me talked about this yesterday, like you said, right? I listened to the Fan episode, and I talked to Caroline about it a lot. And the more I just engaged with my memory of the movie and talked about it, the more I don't know. I could almost go as high as a soft 4, honestly.
Soft 4.
I really like it. It really the plotting and kind of shitty writing of the Gil character is it's really kind of the only bad thing about it. And that's that's a hell of a flaw because he is one of the two main characters of the film. But everything else about it is so cool. Love the Rayburn character, love all of the supporting characters, all of the performances, including De Niro, are great. Cinematography, incredible. Direction, incredible. Amazing music and sound design. I went back and watched, and I don't think I really thought about this when we watched it, but you and me talked about it off pod. In that scene that I find so funny where he says the little bit thing and pinches his finger, there is one of my absolute favorite shots cinematographically of the entire podcast so far. I didn't even catch it when I first watched it, but when I went back comedically to watch the scene again on YouTube, I noticed it. There's a scene and De Niro looks back as he's about to throw the knife and get Swiss cheesed by the cops. He turns around and as he turns around away from Bobby, he's turning to look at himself on the big screen behind himself because
Jumbotron.
He's radiating this kind of beatific appreciation for the fact that he's finally on the Jumbotron. But when he does the turn, his image on the Jumbotron is mirrored to his image,
that is a really good shot.
In the actual picture, and oh my gosh, this is an incredible, beautiful shot.
That's
that
the
alone,
power of Tony
Scott.
I
saw. Right, that was what I saw, and I was I think this might be a 4-star. That is an incredible film shot. It drags it up so much and really elevates it beyond the bad Gil writing, which is really weak. Super cool.
The Fan, officially a 3.5-star film from the both of us.
Yep. Easy 3.5. Could be soft 4, but I'm going with 3.5.
Yeah, same.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's a great idea. I think we should do that. I think that we should take a note if we're reflecting, amongst each other off pod about a movie in between episodes. Great to revisit and acknowledge that. So let's get into Sleepers. All right, so just a little bit of context about this film. So this is an ensemble cast. Who's in this movie, Mike?
I mean, everyone. You already mentioned Brad Pitt, Robert De Niro, Minnie Driver, Kevin Bacon. We also have Jason Patric, Dustin Hoffman, Jeffrey Donovan in a minor supporting role, and Billy Crudup, of course. So, I mean, huge cast, and I'm not including everyone either.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and they're all really good. Like, you know who I really liked in this movie, like whose performance kind of surprised me? Because I was wondering how it was going to work in the context of his character and like the rest of these kind of relatively like smooth talking weirdos, I think, who are in this film. I was thinking about Dustin Hoffman and I was like, man, am I really going to like him? But I thought that the way that he plays the kind of like down on his luck, like alcoholic loser lawyer through this whole narrative is like, he kind of speaks very slowly and he's got like a goofy haircut and like, I found him tremendously compelling. Like, I really loved everyone in this movie. I thought it was great.
You know what? It's so funny to me that you highlight Dustin Hoffman's performance because I kind of didn't like it.
Okay. I'm excited to talk about that. Yeah, yep.
We can get more into that when we get to the Dustin Hoffman bit, but there will be a divergence of opinion. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about before we get there.
So that's one thing about it. Another thing about it that I would say is, this film is very of its time in a way that makes me feel really nostalgic. There was a sentimentality to these kinds of like life story films, I think from like probably the mid 80s through the late 90s. Really doesn't feel like it's a thing very much anymore. Like, we don't really get big movie releases that are like this anymore, do we? Like, this film is very saccharine, kind of in the same way that Melvin's Room is. But ultimately, I feel confident believing that you'll agree with me about this. Significantly more effective in its sentimentality than Melvin's Room was.
Oh yeah,
I know I'm doing it, just so you know. I know you're looking at me like, does he know he's saying Melvin's Room? I know it's Marvin's Room.
I know.
Yeah, I'm doing it on purpose. So it has that kind of like very sentimental quality to it. Lots of weeping strings in the score. Lots of like emotionally manipulative sound and visual design, which is something that I generally really like, and I think something that you generally don't really like. And so I'm excited to talk about whether this movie made you cry. That's exciting for me. It definitely made me cry at least 3 or 4 times.
Not a surprise.
So that's oh yeah, I mean, any movie can make me cry, whereas like I think this movie is on its face actually like profound and emotionally affecting, so like for a normal person it would not be surprising if it made them cry.
I'm just imagining you sitting in a darkened movie theater just weeping at the end of Austin Powers and Goldmember. Just so happy that
it
Dr.
really
Evil
is
and
so
Austin
groovy,
Powers.
baby.
That is so shagadelic. as snot bubbles out of your nose.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
So that's another thing I would say about it. The other thing that I would like to point out, just because I think my recap is going to be relatively succinct, in spite of the kind of scope of the narrative here. This
2.5 hour long movie.
Yeah, this is an extremely long movie. Not only is it 2.5 hours long, but it feels way longer than 2.5 hours long. Like
there are a few reasons for that.
Long.
There are, yeah.
Go ahead. Tell me what you think the reasons are. I don't have a diagnosis.
One structurally, we're covering decades in the lives of the main cast, so it feels you see the passing of time visually. And 2, I think there are some pacing issues in the film.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, yeah. So we'll get more into those too when the relevant scenes come up. But I have some thoughts there.
Yep. So yeah, narratively, right? This is a like 2 time period story. So we get, and I didn't really notice when it was, but I think it was relatively neatly bisected down the middle, right? The first half of the movie is about the cast of characters when they're young. And in Robert De Niro's case, he plays a priest named Father Bobby, him as like a kind of younger priest. Like, I think he's probably supposed to be in his 30s. And then, the later narrative's about 15 years later, and it's the young boys when they're in their 20s, and then Father Bobby is like a middle-aged priest, like maybe in like his 40s or early 50s, presumably. And yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's a cool movie. Let's talk about it. All right, so the film starts off. Something to say about this is, in a way that has been hotly contested in the ensuing years, this film is supposed to be autobiographical. Did you know that?
Yes. Well, I mean, I knew it after I watched the film.
Yep. Yeah, I wondered about this too. I noted it and then I looked into it afterward because it opens with narration that says that it's a true story. And I don't think it really is. It's been very credibly challenged by New York State and by like a lot of other institutions, like the truthfulness of this. But there's a gentleman who wrote this book. His name is Lorenzo Carcaterra. And so the kind of main character, who is played by Jason Patric as an adult, goes by Shakes, but he is a semi-autobiographical version of the guy who wrote the book on which this film is based. And I think you'll understand as we talk more about the narrative of this film why some people and institutions may want to challenge the accuracy of its historical value. So there you go. Yeah. I just remarked here as I was watching the opening roll, quite the stacked cast, and then I didn't know this was gonna happen. John Williams did the score. Like I was so pumped when his name popped up.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I was going to mention it.
This movie is incredible. Like John Williams, like he came with it.
Yeah, I didn't know until after I watched the film and I was reading the Wikipedia page, but it's a really good score, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. It goes hard.
Yeah, it goes real hard. Like Mr. Star Wars himself. Yeah, definitely. All right, so the film starts in 1966. We have four main characters: Michael, Tommy, John, and Shakes. Here's a little something about me. I really struggle with narratives in films about kids, remembering which kid is which.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at no point during any of this first section of the film recap will I talk about specifically which kid anything is happening to or about. And I wondered on reflection after the film whether that mattered. And after thinking about it for a couple days, I really don't think it did. I think that the occurrences of the first act, they happen to and about all of the children, and like none of the individual trauma I don't think really informs their like adult personalities. It's like they are all super equally traumatized by what happens in the events of the first half of the film. So these guys, Michael, Tommy, John, and Shakes, they're boyhood friends. They live in Hell's Kitchen. And the narrative explains that at this period in the mid to late 60s, Hell's Kitchen was this like very cloistered, very like, primarily Italian Catholic community in a way that is sort of protected from the outside world. And so the narrative references like the Vietnam War, it references civil rights and the rise of kind of like the feminist movements of that era, and how those things had a relatively limited impact on people who lived in this Hell's Kitchen community, just because of that way that immigrant communities are, right? Like suspicious of outsiders, like very interested in kind of like group mores and group rules rather than the mores and rules of broader society. It's interesting, interesting to think about. So the boys are very Catholic. They're all altar boys, and the priest at the church where they go is Robert De Niro. I wrote it down, but would you like to say when we get our first De Niro sighting?
I'd love to. I had it at 5 minutes and 59 seconds. What about you?
That's fascinating. I wrote 6:05. Did you watch it on iTunes?
No, YouTube.
Gotcha. So there you go.
I'm a YouTube rental guy. I don't know why.
Oh, hey, let me tell you something. Something I try to do, just so you know, when I watch these movies is I think really hard, should I buy it or should I rent it?
Oh, yeah.
And I rightfully chose to buy this movie because I really like this one and I could see myself watching it again someday. And I also rightfully chose not to buy the most recent couple turds that we watched. So I'm on a pretty hot streak.
You're on a hot streak.
At the end of the movie, I assess, did I make the right financial decision for myself? Was it profitable for me to rent versus buy? And I think I'm nailing it lately. So I bought this one on iTunes. It was $12 instead of $4 to rent. So I just got to watch it 2 more times in my life, and I'm getting my money's worth. Robert De Niro plays this guy named Father Bobby. Oh man, Father Bobby, easily one of my favorite Robert De Niro performances of all time. Like, this is an incredible Robert De Niro character. He is playing like perfectly to his strengths as an actor in this role, and this character is tremendously compelling. Like, it's awesome. How do you feel about Father Bobby?
I agree. Unfortunately, I think I actually tarnished my viewing of this film a little bit because my expectations were off. So when we did the roll last week, I read usually when we do the roll, I will read just the first paragraph of the Wikipedia page. I really don't want to spoil it for myself. I just want to know what kind of film it is, who's starring in it, when is it from. And so I knew that Sleepers was a legal crime drama film about these 4 childhood friends who experience some sort of trauma and end up in court. And we introduced the fact that they're all, devout Catholic boys, and Robert De Niro, heavy hitter actor, plays the priest. And so for the first act of this film, until the actual inciting incident happens, I thought he was going to be the villain.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess that's that's kind of a logical way to think about it. So that must have really painted your
It really
your first
did
act
because
read.
when we're introduced to him, he's interacting with the altar boys because they're being mischievous and stuff, and he clearly has like a close relationship with them, and I'm like, no, boys, don't do it, get out of there. No, it turns out he's awesome.
A lot of
he's like
in the Catholic Church.
There's a lot. We need to crack down. We need to do it. But no, he turns out he's a wonderful character. You're absolutely right about his performance.
Yeah, and I should say we've like referenced this obliquely, but you and me talked about this yesterday, and I agree it is worth doing. So content/trigger warning about this episode. This episode and this film are about child molestation primarily, and the ways that child molestation and its traumatic effects on the children who are abused are depicted. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty upsetting, right? Like, I personally don't have any connection to this topic, so I don't find it particularly upsetting, other than hypothetically. But I can imagine, if you're a person who feels some kind of way about child abuse or has some kind of reaction to that, you might not want to listen to this one, or just know coming in that we're going to talk about that stuff, and you may find it upsetting. And similarly, if you listen to this podcast in mixed company, know that we are going to talk about child abuse in this episode.
If you're,
and it may be pretty upsetting.
If you're thinking about playing the podcast on your Bluetooth speaker at your family barbecue, maybe go to the Rocky and Bullwinkle episode.
Yeah, but the Catholic Church is not the aggressor in this film. Father Bobby is a stand-up guy. He is probably one of the most noble characters Robert De Niro has played on film, in my awareness, and he's great through and through. So Father Bobby, it's kind of explained in the narration. He started his life in Hell's Kitchen, similarly to the boys, and he was kind of a two-bit criminal as a younger man. And as he kind of came into adulthood, he had some kind of reckoning, some crisis of faith or something, and found God and found the priesthood instead of going into a criminal life. So he's a very worldly guy, and he is, in spite of being a priest who is depicted almost universally as a very noble, very morally upstanding person, he has a little bit of a seedy past, and that's a part of his ability.
I think that is so cool. A street smart priest, I think, is just such a cool type of person. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. He's so cool. Like, Father Bobby is like the kind of man I want to be. Like, I think that in a lot of ways, he's the kind of man that a lot of people aspire or should aspire to be. Like, he's a hard worker. He is kind. He flexes his muscle when he needs to protect people who need protecting.
Yep.
He loves the boys and like does everything he can to support them, even though they're not his children, right? Like, he sees his role as a priest, like caring for the people in his community. He's just, he's awesome. He's just like tremendously compelling character in film. So that's Father Bobby. And so the boys they're kind of rascals. So we see them doing sort of rascally things, right? One thing that we see a couple of them doing is going into the confessional so that they can eavesdrop on a lady's confession about sleeping with married men and becoming pregnant. We see them as sort of like peeping Toms. And this is all very innocent, the way it's depicted, right? It's important to understand. Like, these boys are like 8 to 11 years old. Like, it's like the things they're doing that we're going to describe, they're things that you would think of as being like gross and weird if somebody in like their maybe like late teens did them. But like, these are like little boys, right? Like, these are like innocent, innocent things that they are doing in the context of their age, and to your point, the time, right? The times were different in the late 60s. We see them peeping on these ice skater ladies in the locker room and looking at some boobies, getting really excited about that. But the oldest boy, who can't remember which one that is, doesn't matter. He wants to get into being a criminal. And so he pursues small jobs with the local crime boss, who's a guy named King Benny, who I similarly found incredibly compelling as a character.
Yeah, he was cool.
Yeah.
That was Shakes. Shakes is the one who wanted to work for King Benny.
The oldest one.
The only,
well, you're right.
I don't know if he's the oldest one. He's the one.
Together. Yeah.
Well, that, and he's the narrator of the film.
Yeah.
There's a lot of narration in this film, and it's all Shakes' narration. Yeah. So when he's saying things, that's how I was able to keep track, because he's saying things like, I started working for King Benny. Yeah. But you're right. The other three, like, whatever.
Yeah. So Shakes, right? He's the main character. Jason Patric, as an adult, goes to work for King Benny. And a thing that is described in the initial narration that is implied by my frame, but like I'd like to make explicit here, is like, the idea of the way that crime works in this community and this environment is that it is not done to people in the community, right? Like, outsiders cannot do crime to people in the community. People in the community are treated fairly, even by the local criminals in the community. And so King Benny, like, he's probably a terrible guy, right? But the primary context in which we understand him is the way that he relates to the boys and the way that he relates to the other people in the community. And so, in spite of the fact that he's like a local crime boss doing grift, he's depicted in like a relatively upstanding way. And he too, in his way, is like a good mentor to the boys, from a different perspective than Father Bobby. So Shakes starts to work for King Benny, just doing small jobs. He's like doing money pickups and bringing things to people and whatever, like small stuff. And one day he has a near miss with some local ruffians who try to steal whatever he's moving around for King Benny. And so he gets permission from King Benny to bring his friends with him on his jobs, just so he's not alone. So maybe like people will be less prompted to want to fuck with him.
How many?
So
what are they, like 10 years old?
Yeah, about. I mean, they vary in age, right? Like,
well,
I'm
sure,
thinking
but in the beginning, like this, yeah.
Yep. No, I mean like.
Amongst
each other,
right,
they're
right,
different
right.
ages. Yeah.
So how many average 9 years old? How many 9-year-old kids do you think you could take in a fight? Like, how many would it take to kind of like intimidate you? Would 3. 4 be enough? Yeah.
3.
Yeah, I think realistically, yeah.
Really think about it,
they
right?
could start
you're maybe
grabbing you, pulling you down.
Right. You're maybe going to be able to fight off 2, but like the other one could run up and whack you in the head with something heavy, or like poke you in the eyes or something. Like, I think that once they're mobile and relatively coordinated, 3 people of any age could like overpower almost anyone other than like the strongest, fittest person. It's just hard to manage 3 assailants. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Yeah, because 2, you just alternate. Punch, kick.
Oh,
punch, kick.
Punch one in the face, punch the other in the face. Like,
right,
boom,
exactly.
You get a third one in the mix, like
right. They're going to jump on your back suddenly. Yeah, there's a whole other dimension to that. I think you're right. Strength in numbers. So okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So another thing we find out about Father Bobby that's awesome is he's really good at basketball. And so he plays a lot of pickup basketball with people in the community, including the kids, and it seems like he's better than everybody else, which is also awesome. Like he's always winning whenever they're depicted playing basketball together.
He has the power of the Lord on his side.
Yep. So we get a small time jump. Now it's 1967. I don't know if I said it, but it was 1966 at the beginning. So we get a 1-year time jump. Vietnam is getting into full swing, and people in the community are dying. So there's a lot of funerals of drafted community members who are coming back home. We get a great Father Bobby moment here. One of the boy's mother's boyfriends hurts Ronnie. Is that one of the boys? It's not, right? It's just like another
John,
isn't it? John. Oh, did I misunderstand that it was Johnny? Yeah, it was one of the boys, right?
Yeah.
So Johnny gets hit by one of his mom's boyfriends in a way that punctures his lung, and he ends up in the hospital. And we see in this scene the great contrast of, like, you know, Father Bobby's like nurturing side and his tough guy, like former criminal side. We see him go to the hospital and visit Johnny, and he brings some comic books, and he's like very nurturing and supportive, and you can tell he's like paying close attention to like being there for him in this moment. And then in the next scene, we see he confronts the boyfriend and like essentially like scares the shit out of him. And he essentially says, like, the scene like takes 90 seconds, but he essentially says, like, if you like hit that boy again, I will kill you. Like,
it's really
good makes stuff. It very clear. Like, this is the last time you're going to do this. Like, you know, you're going to be meeting God if you if you mess with this boy again. And like he backs down immediately. So like Father Bobby is like, he is godly and like nurturing, but like he's also, you know, he's like young man Robert De Niro, right? Like, he's a pretty scary guy. He plays that like that mobster style character.
Yeah, this
like,
is Heat era De Niro.
Bobby. Yeah, it's awesome. So the inciting incident is about to happen here, right? So
sure is.
We got to cut ahead to the summer of 1967. This threw me momentarily. I know this is like a wrong thing about the way that I think about the world, just because of the way the calendar is structured, but in my mind, I think of winter as the last season of the year, even though it's actually the first season of the year, because only like the first 10 days of winter take place at the end of the previous year. So winter 1967 goes into summer 1967.
Oh, so okay. That threw me off too, honestly.
Yeah, we're happening in like January or February. It throws me off every time. So now we cut ahead a few months. We're in the summer of 1967, a few months later, and the boys are more raucous than ever. And so they have this thing that they like to do. They have this bit that they do to essentially steal hot dogs from a local hot dog vendor.
Yeah.
Yep, it's a scam. And what they do is one boy goes up and orders a hot dog. And when he's given it by the proprietor of the hot dog stand, he runs away. And this makes the hot dog vendor have to decide, well, do I want to chase after the boy and leave my cart alone? Or do I want to let him go, which obviously is less risky with the cart, but it lets a miscreant get away with stealing from me, which is probably not a great reputation to develop in the neighborhood, that you're like someone who can be stolen from with no cost.
Right.
So they do this, and he chooses to give chase. And so he gives chase, and it's a really long chase. And in the time that this is happening, the other boys come and they like, you know, feast on the hot dogs for free from the cart, but they're feeling kind of prankish. So they decide to take the cart and like move it away. And I don't really understand why they did this, but I remember, you know, I don't know, when I was a kid, I can remember a few times getting sucked up into like peer pressure and like flights of fancy that like young boys get into, and like just doing something that obviously I would never have done if I was like in the right state of mind. And I think that like that's what happens, right, to these boys. They're like caught up in like the emotion and the testosterone of this moment, and so they decide to do this really stupid thing. Like,
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm 35 years old. I actually have thought this because sometimes in the CVS near where I live, I think the local police, they'll park in that parking lot and then they'll go to one of the local cafes to get coffee. And I see the running cop car and I think, wouldn't it be so fun to just move it one block over, you know, and just walk away? I don't know how serious of a crime that would be, but I mean, it's just harmless
Moving
fun.
a cop car?
I know that really
probably
complicates
felony,
things,
right?
doesn't it?
Yeah, probably an extremely serious
that's why
crime.
I haven't. Yeah. That's why I haven't done it. But they're leaving it running. They think they're untouchable, and I think that just makes them all the more prankable. But I get where these kids are coming from.
Auto, but it's also you know, it's like state or federal property, depending upon, you know, which law enforcement agency it is. It doesn't sound like it would be good.
They should. I plead not guilty under the boys will be boys doctrine.
Yeah, I'm 35 years old. Boys will be boys.
Well, how old do you have to be to like no longer be considered a rascal? Could I be a 35-year-old rascal? Probably not.
No, I don't think so. I think probably 14 is like the age.
Once you're like a teenager.
I think, yeah, right. Once your voice drops, you got a bit more prominent Adam's apple, right? Okay, so anywho, so the thing that they decide to do that is like totally understandable as an innocent boyhood prank, but obviously incredibly stupid, and my God, it's really going to ruin their lives.
It's really stupid.
Is they decide to push the hot dog cart down the stairwell into a subway platform. So right, like at street level in New York City, there are like stairwells that go down to subway platforms. There's ones all
That's
over
a
the place.
fact.
There's hundreds of them. And they push it down the stairs. And unfortunately,
I mean, what they're doing, because the vendor
you're right.
catches
Thank you for
up
the
to them.
clarification. Yep, I was misremembering. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, they are trying to hold the hot dog cart like kind of over the first step in the staircase at the top of the staircase, but it's incredibly heavy.
Yep.
There you go. There's your context.
But you didn't even say it. The reason why they're doing it, they're not trying to play the prank. They're holding it over because they want to use that as a way to get away from the hot dog vendor when he comes to them. Like he's going to come and he's going to be the one who has to save his cart from falling down the stairs.
Right.
And that will give them it's going to take him like a minute
to run
like
away.
A lot of time to get away from him. So if they fuck it up and they drop the cart down the stairs and it hits a man who's walking up the stairs and brutally injures him.
He gets dusted. He gets pancaked.
I thought he died in the scene, but it said in the next scene that he's like in the hospital recovering. Yeah, so I'm glad he didn't die. Like, that poor guy, like he's just living his life.
They said the subway was safer than driving.
Yep. So the man's recovery is very long. The boys are charged with reckless endangerment. They are initially remanded to their parents' custody, but then they have a court hearing. 3 of them are sentenced to 12 to 18 months in juvie, and 1 is sentenced to 6 to 12 months in juvie. And so I should say, I didn't know this. Until I watched this movie. The reason why it's called Sleepers is because a sleeper is a boy who's in juvenile detention for a long time. So it's like the title references them. They are the titular sleepers in this context.
Yes.
What are you laughing about?
I was just thinking, I didn't think about this when I was watching the film, and now that we're talking about it, I'm thinking about that guy who got pancaked. And I'm just imagining, you know that that vendor like visited the guy in the hospital, and he's in like a full body cast. And then, the vendor offered him free hot dogs for life. He's like, when you get out of here, there's always a free hot dog waiting for you with the works relish, ketchup, mustard, however you like it, buddy. He's like, I don't have any teeth anymore. I'm going to have to suck the hot dog down.
The bones in my arms are dust. How will I eat the hot dog? Will you feed it to me? He gets destroyed.
It's
because
really
the hot dog cart has propane tanks in it.
It's very heavy. Yeah.
Even a single propane tank, like the kind that I put in my grill, like I'm thinking when it's full, it must weigh.
Oh, they're heavy.
At least 30 pounds, right? Like 30 or 35 pounds. Like you put a couple of those bad boys in there, like plus the cart. You do not want to get hit by that after it descends like 3 or 4 floors of stairs. Okay, so the boys are going to juvie, right? And they are sentenced to the Wilkinson Home for Boys. And it doesn't seem like a very nice place to be. So I'm just going to... I had a real emotional journey. So just so you know, I did not know what this movie was about. I knew nothing about what was going to happen in this movie. No, but you knew... Because you were kind of expecting it, that it was going to be about sexual assault. I didn't even know that. Like, I didn't know they were going to go to juvie. I didn't know anything was going to happen in this movie. And so, I'm just going to read my notes here. Because I had an emotional journey over these few sentences as I was kind of like internalizing like what it seemed like was going to happen in this film. The Wilkinson Home for Boys. It doesn't seem like a very nice place to be. Noakes, their guard, seems to be a real fucking freak. There's a nicer guard named Marlborough who rescues them from having to eat food off the floor. Soon after, Noakes, ostensibly as an act of retaliation, sexually assaults the boys. So this is all depicted over like maybe 12 to 15 minutes of screen time, but it's kind of this escalation of the abuse, which we are then made to understand over the ensuing like maybe 20 or 30 minutes of the narrative is like, the sexual assault was not an act of retaliation. Like it's like Noakes is just a freak child rapist who like uses his position as a guard in this prison to assault little boys. It's relatively horrifying, honestly, to imagine like that this could have happened at some point. You think this ever happened?
Probably, yeah, definitely. Right? Yeah, it
must have. Like
think about like
lax oversight on these kinds of places. Like
There's less oversight. Just think about like prison culture in general and abuses of power. Oh, I'm sure it happened.
Yeah. And we know, right? I mean, the prison, we talked about this in the episode last week, right? The prison on which Nickel Boys was based, right? The abuses that are depicted in Nickel Boys really happened. And that place, oh my God, this is like one of those crazy things about like modern history is like when you read about stuff like this. The school I think we read and that's fictionalized in Nickel Boys, I think only closed like maybe 20 years ago, I think we found, right? Like it was like when we were in high school. Like, yeah, really messed up. And like think about like the Catholic reform schools that Canadian Indigenous folks were sent to. They just closed those like I think maybe 15 years ago, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission only started like a decade ago. Like they're still paying reparations to these Indigenous folks, whose parents were abused in these facilities. Yeah, they're relatively horrifying to imagine. I wonder if this happened though, as New York State argues it did not, in any New York State juvenile detention facilities. Anywho, the boys' parents, they mostly don't visit them, but it seems like Father Bobby comes all the time. He meets with Shakes, and he doesn't, Shakes and the boys, they don't want to talk about what's happening to them.
Yeah,
right?
They've been
threatened.
threatened.
I think that this, for me, is like one of the saddest and I think most realistic things about the way this is all depicted in the film is like, I'm trying to think of the way to describe this. So development freezes at the point of trauma, right? In a lot of ways, like parts of your psychosocial development freeze at points of trauma. And something that trauma does is it enforces like the kind of frozen identity and psychosocial state of adulthood, at what is really an earlier psychosocial state of development, right? And so these boys, they feel some responsibility for what's happening to them, even though they don't have any, obviously, and they feel ashamed of it, even though there's nothing for them to be ashamed of.
Right.
And they're going to carry that shame through their lives. Like in the adult narrative, they will finally tell people that this happened to them, but it's like 15 years later, and they are horrified to share this information as though even as adults in their like late 20s to early 30s, this is a shameful thing. And like, yeah, I mean, it's shameful for the people who did it. It's not shameful for you, right? But like, abuse victims, especially victims of abuse that happens when they're children, they often feel this way. Like they can't talk to anybody about it because it's like emasculating to have been abused in some way. But like, no, it isn't. You were a child, Right. And that's part of like the kind of like cyclical trauma that abuse can I think enforce on someone's life. So they don't want to tell Father Bobby this is happening to them, even though it is. But Father Bobby knows, right? Because he tells Shakes in the scene that he was in Wilkinson as a boy. And I can't remember how this will come up in the narrative. I think it might be in this scene, so I'm just going to say it now. Father Bobby talks about how he visits his childhood best friend in prison who's serving a life sentence for triple murder, and it is strongly implied that there is like a kind of mirror nature to this narrative, whereas like much like in the adult portion of this narrative as it's described, some of the boys are like well-to-do, upwardly mobile professionals, and some of the boys are like violent criminals who are like never going to make it out of that life. That like Father Bobby's friend who was in Wilkinson with him was abused, and he became a violent criminal who is now serving a life sentence for triple murder. And Father Bobby is one of the ones who like got out. Like in spite of the fact that he was abused, it had a happy ending for him. He found a way to like channel his trauma toward a more mature life.
My when you say abused, do you mean sexually abused or just abused in the more abuse. Yeah. Because when you said Father Bobby knows, I mean, I think he knows how bad the conditions are, right, and that sort of detentions. Yeah, he's not aware of the sexual abuse.
Yes, that is correct. I think that is a fair thing to say, because I think he would have done something about it if he'd known about the sexual abuse. Yeah, but he knows that he knows it's a sham, right? Like this is not a nice place. The boys in this place are all being systematically abused in some way, because the sexual abuse is not the only thing that's happening, right? The other types of abuse that are happening are like, I would say like physical and emotional in nature, but not as extreme as the sexual abuse. So I mentioned this in my like reading of my first few minutes watching their experience in the Wilkinson home. One of the boys gets too close to a boy who is not a part of the group, and the boy like hits him, or like maybe like turns up his like tray that has his food on it or something, and the food all spills on the ground, and Noakes comes and makes them eat the food off the ground. And this is depicted as like a relatively normal occurrence. Like the one guard Marlborough, who I described, like he's upset by it, but none of the other guards seem upset by it. Like nobody steps in to stop Noakes from doing this.
Clearly, like,
in a
part
way
of the
that
culture.
implies that like, right, this is just part of the culture of like the ways the boys are treated. We see them beaten very regularly, sometimes with open hands, but sometimes with fists, and even with the batons that the guards carry. And we see them remanded to what looks like a relatively horrible solitary confinement situation, like extremely dirty cells, no food. You see rats moving around. The floors are very wet. So like this is a horrible fucking place. And like, yeah, the sexual abuse is like very bad, of course, but like even without it, like this is a crazy thing for children to be subjected to. Yeah, we can get into like, you know, the politics of this, like maybe later on, like criminal justice, like politics and psychology and stuff, but like fair context. All right, so there is a moment here. I thought this would be like more of a character moment, but it really isn't. I'm wondering if this got cut in editing. So Shakes is in English class, and he has an English teacher who's having them do book reports, and you can see that most of the students are like super disengaged with the subject matter, but Shakes gets a compliment from the teacher for writing a really insightful book report about the Count of Monte Cristo, which, if you've never read it, is this kind of like epic about this guy who has things done to him, right? Like it's so hard to describe this succinctly because the book is like 900 pages long.
It's so long.
He like has things happen to him. He like, you know, is victimized by some people. He goes to prison. He escapes from prison, and then he bides his time for years until he is able to get, you know, spectacular revenge, like Machiavellian revenge on the people whom he perceives.
Well, I love it. Great book.
Yeah. It's a much more complicated narrative than that, but like that is the context that is important because in a way, this film, you know, from a plot perspective, is supposed to be an echo of Count of Monte Cristo. That's why it's made explicit in the narrative. I think its success at doing that is actually quite limited. But like that's clearly what Levinson was trying to do. So in this moment, not knowing where the story was going to go, I perceived this as portending a relationship between Shakespeare and the English teacher, but it's just about establishing his love of the Count of Monte Cristo. So he has this warm moment. The only version of the book that he has is a comic book adaptation, so the teacher gives him an actual copy, for what it's worth, of the abridged version of the book, because the abridged version is the version most people read because it's not 900 pages long. So for some reason, this all seemed very weird to me. There's a football game between the inmate boys and the guards. And so the boys recruit this other kid. He's a black kid named Rizzo. And I mention his blackness because I think that it's supposed to have a racist dimension to it, right? Because of what will happen to him. Like, it is implied that the severity of the degree to which he is punished for what's going to happen is racist in nature because he is one of the few black kids in the facility. They recruit him because he's big and tough and strong to try against the guards. Like, the expectation is the boys are going to get like walloped by the guards. There's no way they could win. And like culturally, there is an expectation that even if they could win physically, they will not, because to win against the guards would be to like invite their wrath. Essentially, this is supposed to be like a sham, essentially like a friendly game where the guards are going to win no matter what.
Yeah, this is Michael's idea to recruit Rizzo, and in my notes I wrote pretty dumb idea by Michael. Like, what's the end goal here? You know, I don't know. Didn't make a ton of sense to me.
It's just kids being stupid kids, I think. Like
boys will be boys.
I mean, I think that for us as adults, right, it is difficult to imagine, but I probably think a lot more than you do because I have a kid, about the ways that kids interpret things relative to the ways that adults interpret things, right? For them, they're here for their whole lives. Like,
it's true.
It's like you and me, if we went to prison for a year, I don't think I would do well in prison, but like,
No.
I don't think the amount of time that I would be in prison would be a problem for me. Like, it's like, I can think about my life, and if it's only a year, it's just like, yeah, it's like, it's only a year, whatever. Like, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm going to try not to attract any negative attention. I'm going to try not to piss off any of the authority figures or any of the like other inmates or anything. And it's just a year. That's the way I'm going to handle it. But I think if you're like 12 years old, a year,
that's true.
That's 8% of your life.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know. So it feels like forever for them. So I think like this deep into their imprisonment, this is a way, it's very stupid. You're right. But like, this is a way for them to like, get the rocks off a little bit, you know, like exercise like some agency and autonomy in their lives because they feel systematically disempowered by this situation in a way that feels permanent to them, in a way that wouldn't to an adult. So it's very irrational, but like emotionally, I think it makes sense for boys, like young boys, to behave this way in this in this situation. So they win, and not only do they win, but they kind of beat the shit out of some of the guards. So the boys, our four main characters, are sent to solitary for some indeterminate amount of time.
Thrown in the hole.
And we learn, of course, via narration, because as you said, this is a very narration-heavy movie, that Rizzo was also remanded to solitary, but the guards beat him to death. So his punishment is being killed by the guards in prison for this. It's pretty fucked up, honestly. But you know, just so everybody knows, this story has a happy ending, as happy as it can be. So Rizzo's killing will be relevant in a somewhat satisfying way to the narrative later on. Tragic as it may be.
Why don't you just get to that?
So we fast forward another year, and they're still in. And they have a conversation where it's made very explicit that they are not going to tell anybody what happened to them here when they get out. So on the last day, we see they're about to be released, and we have a scene of Shakes in his room, and Noakes comes for one more rape before he gets out. And so that is the end of this portion of the narrative. We're about to move into the second act. You have any closing thoughts on the first act before we get into the second act?
No, I will just note, I noted when this new act begins because we get a pretty significant time jump. So we spent the first hour of the film with the gang as boys.
Okay, so fast forward to 1981. So we get like a 13-ish year time jump. And we see two men in a divey-looking bar in Hell's Kitchen, and it's John and Tommy. They're not looking so hot. They're not like looking really bad or anything. But it's clear, like, they have not acclimated to, like, society, like mainstream society, right? Like, they are hustlers. They're criminals. They're at the bar. And I think John goes to the bathroom. And as he is walking back from the bathroom, he recognizes a man who's sitting eating a meal, and it's Noakes. So they just happen to bump into him in the bar. And he stops him, and they have a conversation because he really wants to get a good look at his face. And he confirms that it is him. He goes back to the bar and tells Tommy, and they go over and they confront Noakes. It's a pretty emotional confrontation. Incredible face acting in this scene, by the way. Like guys... Yeah, the guys, I don't know who these actors are. Are these actors?
Well, one was, I forget who was, I forget which one was which.
So Tommy is Billy Crudup. Yep.
Okay, yes. Tommy is Billy Crudup.
Yep.
John is a guy I've never heard of before.
I didn't recognize him, honestly. I did not recognize Billy Crudup. Yeah, the hair makes him look really different.
Yeah, he's got like long, greasy hair.
It is hair unlike I've seen on him in any other role. I feel like
he didn't look like Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, yep. Love Dr. Manhattan. Anywho, so they go over and they have a confrontation with him. It's an extremely emotional scene. Like, you can tell that in a way that I think is like I said, there's some really effective storytelling in this movie. This scene, I think, does such a good job of introducing the characters of John and Tommy as adults because they're tough guys, right? Like, we've seen them at the bar for 3 or 4 minutes before they go and confront Noakes, and they have this front up. They're like very tough guys. But when they go over to confront Noakes, they're still tough, right? I mean, they're going to kill him, obviously. But you can see they're like on the edge of like breaking down in this scene. Like, there's a lot of like very subtle face acting by both of them that like in spite of the fact that they're trying to be like really manly and tough about the way they handle it, like this is a PTSD moment for them, right? Like confronting like their abuser, and we see like a lot of like subtle breaks in their facial expressions and stuff, and like it's amazing. Like it is an incredible like tense scene, and like just amazing acting by both of these guys. And so they confront him, and ultimately they do kill him. They kill him in a pretty brutal and violent fashion. I think they must shoot him like 10 times.
They shoot him 7 times. I counted.
Yeah. They shoot out like both kneecaps,
a lot of times.
And like once in the chest and like in the arm. And then finally it culminates in a killing blow headshot. And so there's people in the bar, right? So there's the bartender. There's 2 guys sitting at the bar who seem like more like mainstream society types. They're talking about politics in the first scene when they're introduced. And then there's a couple sitting at a booth in the same area of the dining room as where the Noakes killing took place. So they're really close. And one of them, Janice from The Sopranos, she gets a real good look at it. She's just looking. Mm-hmm. So she saw their faces. She saw them as they were walking back and forth. She knows what these guys look like. And so this is obviously going to be a problem for the defense. So they're arrested. They go to a pretrial hearing and they plead not guilty. And so there's the other characters, right? There's Michael and Shakes. So Michael is an assistant district attorney. He is a lawyer. He is played by Brad Pitt, and Shakes played by. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that when we're introduced to adult Michael, we kind of see him from behind. We kind of see like a rear, like 3/4 view of his head. And I literally, because I forgot who was in this film, I literally thought to myself, that guy kind of looks like Brad Pitt. And then when we see his face, I was shocked. It was like a Brad Pitt jump scare.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love Brad Pitt. He's great in this movie. It's a really compelling performance. He doesn't talk very much, but it's still really compelling. So then Jason Patric plays Shakes. And so Shakes is he is trying to get into journalism. He is not yet a reporter, but he's like a newsboy, I guess, right? Like I guess is what
he's like a clerk or something.
Like he's just like the guy around the office. Like he like runs errands. He just like does this job. Probably doesn't exist anymore, right? Like maybe it does, I guess. But like I
think now it's like an unpaid internship.
Right. Like, but everything's so automated now that I think these types of like menial jobs as like erstwhile apprenticeships for like getting into like the actual profession of being a reporter are probably less common. But like he's not a reporter yet. He like does stuff like around the paper office, like whatever they need. So Michael and Shakes meet up when they find out this has happened, and this is the only time they talk to each other for the entire movie, till the end. And they make this plan, right? Michael is going to request to prosecute this case against John and Tommy as the ADA, but he's going to botch it on purpose. And he's going to do it in a way that is above reproach, but he's going to basically sandbag the prosecution such that they get off. And he is going to structure the witnesses who are called and the line of questioning in such a way that the abuse comes out. So they're going to use this as an opportunity to both get John and Tommy off of the charges that they've been charged with, but also as a way to get vengeance, Count of Monte Cristo style, essentially on the perpetrators of their abuse. It's super cool.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because they have this conversation, but it's really Michael's plan, right? Like he kind of mentions in the beginning that like, my timeline has been accelerated. It's earlier, it's sooner than I expected to be able to do this. But he's really the mastermind of it, Brad Pitt. And Jason Patric, I mean, he helps with one specific thing, I guess, but he's kind of just in on it, it feels like. It felt like to me, fair. At least.
That's a good clarification. Yep. All right, so this is where we meet Dustin Hoffman. He plays an attorney named Danny Snyder. And so also, I think like somewhat in on this, although not totally in on the details of what's going on, is King Benny, the kind of local crime boss from the first half of the narrative. So King Benny is very invested in defending John and Tommy. He does not want them to be prosecuted. And so he hires this Danny Snyder attorney guy, Dustin Hoffman, I think as like kind of like as like a dumb guy, right? Like as like
he's like hired as a puppet essentially.
Right. Like he's going to basically listen to like whatever is fed to him because the defense doesn't really matter. The prosecution is purposefully going to botch the prosecution. So all they really need from a defense attorney is somebody who's going to take direction and be like small enough, have less general competence, a weaker kind of like perspective on how he wants to handle this such that he'll be more easily manipulable. And so Dustin Hoffman plays this guy, and he's like, he used to be a really good attorney. It's implied in the narrative, like he used to like defend these types of cases, but he's like an alcoholic drug abuser now, and he just does two-bit shit now, essentially. So this is like an opportunity for him to get back into the big leagues. Mm-hmm. And I wrote here, they've got a whole complicated setup to ensure that Michael is seen as credibly prosecuting the case, but also isn't done any physical harm by anybody in the community. So this is key, right? Like Michael is an ADA prosecuting a case against two guys who still live in the community. It would be, it would be logical to assume that somebody's going to kill him, right? Or like find some way to like threaten him out of prosecuting this case. And so King Benny is kind of managing this all. And this is like a difficult thing to manage because they cannot reveal. No one can know that Michael is actually sandbagging the prosecution because otherwise it doesn't work. But there has to be some reason why he cannot be attacked, right? And I don't think it's explained like explicitly in the narrative, but King Benny manages that for them. Like that's part of what he does is like he puts out instructions to like all of the kind of like decentralized figures in the local criminal community that like there are rules about the way we are going to handle this situation, and we will not be doing violence against Michael in spite of the fact that he's the one prosecuting the case. So I didn't talk about her as a character. She's briefly in the childhood narrative.
I totally forgot
Michael
about her.
Michael had a girlfriend in the first half of the narrative. Her character is not important at all, other than to introduce her because she's a major character in this adult portion of the narrative. So this lady, Carol, she's played by Minnie Driver. And she is still very close with the boys. She like dated a bunch of them when they were kids. And she's sort of like the fifth member of the group. She's not as close to them as they are to each other, but there is a very strong like childhood familiarity and closeness there that they have to her, which they don't have really to anybody else except for Father Bobby. And I think in Shakes' case, King Benny. But this is like a pretty tight knit group of like folks from the neighborhood, essentially. So they enlist Carol. She's a social worker and she can pull records. She has access to records that the boys might not otherwise have access to. So the trial begins. A bunch of stuff happens at the beginning of the trial. It's like relatively unimportant, I think, these things that happen at the beginning. So we can just jump ahead like 15 minutes. I don't think anything of importance happens until they realize that they've got the witnesses sorted. They've convinced most of them not to testify against John and Tommy. The only people whom they're still worried about are Janice from The Sopranos and her date, but they have a plan to discredit them on the stand. So the only gap in this whole like plan they're putting together is they want an alibi for John and Tommy. They want somebody who is beyond reproach to testify that they were with John and Tommy the night of the murder, as kind of like the final like nail in this coffin. And so the person they choose is Father Bobby. So I wrote, Father Bobby is back with 3 exclamation points. I was really excited to see him again because I did wonder after the first half of the narrative, I was like, is Father Bobby still going to be a character?
How's he coming back into this? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I was super excited to see that De Niro is still in this movie in the second half. And so Shakes and Carol go to see him and they want him to be the alibi witness. In this moment, this is the first time they ever tell anybody outside of the group, including Carol. Carol doesn't know either. So this is the first time one of the boys tells anybody outside of the four boys what happened. So Shakes tells Robert De Niro what happened, and Carol hears it. And it's a very emotional scene. Father Bobby is still uncertain about whether he's going to do it. You have to remember, like, perjury is a crime, right?
Yeah.
And that's a strong reason not to do it for sure. But, the other thing, right, is like, Father Bobby is like very religious, devout man
of the cloth.
And, you swear on the Bible. So, you're also lying to God, basically, if you perjure yourself. And so like for him, there's like a double reason, right, to like not want to do this. And that's why they want him to be the one to do it, right? Because Father Bobby's got a great reputation. He's a very like upstanding man in the community.
Right.
No one would assume he would perjure himself while like swearing on the Bible. So his word will be taken as true, regardless of what it is.
Well, I want to talk about this scene a little bit before we jump ahead to the scene where Shakes shares the stories of his abuse for the first time. I really like the way this was shot, because what it does is they decide to linger on a close shot of De Niro's face. Yep. And you kind of and the audio kind of just fades in and out. So you hear little snippets, horrific details of the abuse, and you're just fixated on De Niro's face, and it's incredible. The performance is so good. His face acting is so subtle, just trying to listen to the details and process what's happening.
Yeah, sure. And let me just say, so I totally agree with you about this scene. There were multiple scenes in this movie that made me cry. So this is one of them, just so you and our listeners are aware. The other one that I haven't mentioned up to this point is when Father Bobby goes to visit Shakes in the hospital, and Shakes says in the narration that, like, he doesn't want to tell anybody, including Father Bobby, about what's happening to them. And then there's, like, a very long hug they have, and the narration says that it's, like, he'd, like, never loved anybody more before that moment and, like, never wanted to let him go. That also made me cry. Have you cried yet at any point in this movie?
I did not cry. I did not cry in this movie, but that the scene you just described was the closest I came.
Yep.
Because it's absolutely heartbreaking when, Father Bobby is just this pure force of love for the boys.
Yep.
And, there's that powerlessness, and that's so tragic.
Yep, it is. It's horrifying to think about. So we get a bunch of courtroom stuff here. The courtroom stuff in this movie's good. I really like it. So we're kind of getting into like a portion of the film that's really all about the courtroom, right? And just to restate this so everybody is aware, they had the scene with De Niro. He was very affected by it, but it is still up in the air whether he will testify on their behalf. So they leave and it's uncertain. So we go back to the courtroom. While this is happening, there's kind of interspersed details about ways that they are getting vengeance on the other folks who are a part of this, right? So there are 4 guys. So there was Noakes, he's been killed. There's another guy who's now a crooked cop, and so that is the guy who is about to have justice visited upon him. So somehow, probably in his capacity as somebody who works at the newspaper, Shakes gets his hands on some evidence of this dirty cop's dirty dealings, and gives them to an IA officer. And so this is essentially going to culminate in this guy, being found out as a dirty cop. And I think it's explained in the narrative that, like, something happens to him, like he gets his comeuppance, basically. So this is the second of the abusers getting his comeuppance in this scene. The trial continues. There is questioning and cross-examination of Janice from The Sopranos. Dustin Hoffman does a really good job of discrediting her, essentially a 2-pronged argument. So, right, like he has to discredit her as someone who can attest to John and Tommy having been in the bar that night. So he gets her to admit that she'd had like 6 drinks, like
something
wine and
like
a martini
that.
at lunch.
Wino.
And then a few drinks at dinner. And then he does, and this is very effective too, because like he does it in a very compassionate way. Like he's not like mean to her about it or anything. It's a very effective discrediting, because he doesn't even make her feel bad about it. Like she kind of has to admit it, and the jury just sees it the way that he wants her to see it. And then also he gets her to talk about how frightened she was in the moment, and uses that as another way to kind of call the objectivity of her memory of events into question, which is like, it's good. Love Dustin Hoffman. Like, you don't like Dustin Hoffman's acting? I really like him in this portion of the movie.
I like the character for the most part as presented, but Dustin Hoffman makes the decision he speaks in a very mumbly voice, like a low mumbly voice, and it annoyed the shit out of me. Because he's doing a voice. It's not Dustin Hoffman's voice, and he's trying so hard. He talks like this the entire time. Janice from The Sopranos. Could you say how many drinks you had at lunch? Oh, it drove me nuts every time he talked. So yeah, that kind of like took me out of it. Otherwise, yes, I agree with everything you said about him.
Okay. So that happens. And so these witnesses are discredited, right? The jury does not believe that Janice from The Sopranos' testimony matters. So like she's dealt with. The other witnesses will not testify. The ones who will are sufficiently discredited. Then they call, so this is the second one of the third one of the guards who's going to get his comeuppance. They call one of the other guards, this guy named Ferguson, who remained friends with Noakes after the events of the first half of the narrative until his death, as Michael calls him ostensibly as a character witness for for Noakes himself, but the real purpose of his being called is what Dustin Hoffman is going to do. So Michael examines him. He testifies, pretty milquetoast like bullshit about Noakes having been a good guy and like them being friends or whatever, like banal character witness bullshit. But on cross-examination, Snyder, in a way that this was like the one thing in the movie that like I don't know that I necessarily believed, in a way that like kind of strained credulity for me a little bit. He essentially gets him to admit to all of the abuse and that Noakes was the primary perpetrator of all of the abuse. He admits to the beatings. He admits to the solitary confinement. He admits that it was systemic, and he even admits not only to Noakes raping the boys, but to participating in the rapes themselves. And so here's my question for you, right? Like, there's not many things I would perjure myself for. You really don't want to do it, but I don't think I would admit to child molestation, like, unless I was under serious duress, because, like, that's, like, the worst thing you can do. Like,
it really doesn't. And he just comes right out with
it. Like, there's very little resistance, and I was like, would a person really do this? Like, he seems to have, like, no self-defense instinct at all. Like, he's going to get murdered on the street tomorrow when this comes out.
He seems, he seems to feel very guilty. It didn't take much for him to open up about it. So it's interesting because at first, when I was watching the film, I had that exact same thought you did, which was there are no circumstances under which I would ever reveal that information. I would absolutely perjure myself. But then this morning, before we got ready to record, I thought about it a little more, and I thought, they're probably asking because they have proof.
True.
So in that sense, I'm like, this is a real like zero-sum game kind of situation.
Anyway,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's fair.
So maybe you do just try to like, I don't know how you could downplay it, but Kevin Bacon.
Downplay the significance of the most horrible thing you could do to another human being.
I'd be on the stand. I'd be like, listen, my buddy Kevin Bacon, total piece of shit. He had a lot of problems, huge rapist, and then just kind of hope they focus solely on him, like. Oh, well, what were you doing up, while you were a guard? Oh, I was mostly hanging out in the break room watching reruns of The Honeymooners. So no, I don't,
I just saw Kevin Bacon rapes, and both times I said, Noakes, buddy, you shouldn't do that. That's not right.
Listen, my bad for not running it up to the appropriate channels. Again, there were a lot of episodes of The Honeymooners to catch up on. But I know I was totally not in the room. Like, I was just like, how much can I get away with, like, not revealing?
Oh, okay. So, this testimony all happens, right? And so he goes to leave, and as he leaves, either the judge or like maybe the bailiff, somebody is like, maybe don't like leave town, because like I think some folks are going to want to ask you some questions about the testimony you just gave, and so now revenge has been gotten on Ferguson.
It means omerta. It means rewenge.
Right? Like he's the next one. He is gonna presumably be prosecuted for well, maybe not prosecuted because we're beyond the statute of limitations likely, but he certainly is disgraced and will like never be able to show his face in society again after this testimony and whatever is going to happen in the ensuing like investigation that takes place. So trying to remember the order of the rest of the narrative. I'm just going to say this other thing because I don't think I really even wrote it down and I can't remember when it happens. So there will be a recompense for the final of the people, right? And so the final one, I can't remember whose name it is, but this is the guy who was ostensibly primarily responsible for Rizzo's killing.
Yeah.
And so King Benny goes to see Rizzo's brother. So Rizzo's brother is another crime kingpin. In a different community. I don't think the specifics are very important. And so King Benny goes to see him under the auspice of just like two crime bosses talking to each other or whatever. And he essentially transfers a large debt to Rizzo's older brother that cannot be paid by the debtor. And the debtor is the fourth guard. And King Benny's hope is that Rizzo's brother will just accept that he's not able to collect this money from him and kill him as recompense. And it initially seems like maybe the brother, what's the brother's name, by the way?
Eddie.
I'd like to know.
Eddie.
What is it?
Eddie.
Little Caesar.
As
Eddie
played,
Little Caesar. Yep.
By a young Wendell Pierce.
Shit.
There you go. Yep, he's great in the role. And it doesn't seem like he's going to take it. So as King Benny leaves, he's like, I guess I just have to say it. It's like, just so you know, this is the guy who killed your brother.
Subtlety, the art of subtlety is dead.
Right. Like, this is just so you know, like, this is the guy who killed your brother. Like, so consider that in the way that you think about dealing with the situation. And Eddie is like, they said he died of pneumonia. And so we find out in this moment that they like lied about the circumstances of his death to the family. And it's also revealed in this moment, I can't remember if it was in this scene or in the next scene with him, that like, you know, this Eddie guy, he's still pretty torn up about Rizzo's death. He says that he carries a photo with him in his breast pocket everywhere he goes, like for his whole life since he's died. So they were close when they were kids, and he is still very upset about his brother dying in prison. And so they take the fourth guard out and they kill him, essentially. And so recompense for the fourth guard, right? Here. So back to the trial. I don't know if that happened right there, like maybe a few minutes later.
Who cares?
So back to the final stage of the trial. There's a lot of like tension. Like, will it happen? Will it not happen? Like, is Father Bobby going to show up? But Father Bobby does show up. And
it seems like he takes months to decide to do this.
Yeah. Right. It's like he's late. So, like, it's the last day of the trial, and if the alibi witness doesn't show up, they're not going to have that, and he's, like, late, where the judge is getting pissed. So he, like, waited until the last possible minute to decide that he is going to do this, which makes sense, considering the magnitude of it. And so he comes and testifies, and what he testifies is that they were all at a Knicks game together the night of the murders, he, John, and Tommy, and there's a lot of, like, questioning that Michael does of him, like, you know, how can we really believe that you have this, like, whatever, etc., like really making the prosecution seem credible. But ultimately, in a way that I don't think I totally understand, Father Bobby has ticket stubs for
I missed that night. Like how he acquired them.
It's not explained.
Okay.
And I think, like, how would he have them? Like, that's crazy. It's just like a random game from like
that
3
was
or 4
like
months
so
ago. Like
it's like an orgy. It's like an orgy of evidence. It's like, come on, man, you would probably throw those out that night,
right? I always save the stubs, and he like holds them up. Like,
although I do keep my old movie ticket stubs, so you know, there you go.
The other thing I thought about it was, wouldn't he have only saved his? So like in this story, he and John and Tommy went right. And like they got their stubs back, and he was like, "Hey guys, give yours to me. I want to save those too." Like, would anybody actually do that? I think
right. I'm scrapbooking.
Right? But whatever. The jury finds it incredibly compelling. They believe it, and it's very emotional. This scene is because you know, John and Tommy don't really understand what's happening, right? There is an agreement early in the film between the conspirators of this whole like racket they're doing that they are not going to tell John and Tommy what's happening because they want their performance in the courtroom to be
play
real.
better.
And so they don't know. They're not sure whether Michael is actually trying to prosecute them or not. They suspect that he's not just because they know him, but they have no real indication that this conspiracy is going on. They don't know that Father Bobby is going to come testify on their behalf, and they're surprised when he does because it's a lie, right? So then they know, like, they know him well. He's a priest. Like, he doesn't want to lie to God. So they're like they're deeply moved that he was like willing to do this to defend them, essentially. And there is more incredible face acting on like all of the like adult versions of the boys' parts during the scene. This scene didn't make me cry, but the scene did make me feel very emotional. Like, the boys are, like, I think rightfully so, like, very moved by the sacrifice that Father Bobby is making for them. And it's, like, an incredible, like, this is the last time we see him in the movie. It is an incredible, like, end state for his character to be in. Like, what an arc this guy has. This is an awesome Robert De Niro performance. Like, it's so good. So, the jury deliberates and not guilty on all counts. And so they get off. So there's your like happy-ish ending, right? I mean, it's like it's a little bit of a rabbit's foot or monkey's paw or whatever it is, happy ending. So here's the coda, right? Here's the epilogue. All the folks whom we know, right, like the named guards who were involved, have, you know, their recompense due to this. There is an investigation into Wilkinson due to the testimony, and so after the acquittal, the boys and Carol get together one more time at a bar and have a great night together. This scene also made me cry, just so you know. Cannot believe that this one didn't make you cry, because this has like the most manipulative, like John Williams, like weaving strings in it. That kind of shit works on me every time. And it is also like, it is an incredibly emotional scene, like knowing that it's like the last time they'll all be together as described in the narrative. And like, you know, they're happy, right? It is a happy ending for them, but it's only happy in the context of the expectations for their lives, given what's happened to them, right? It is actually still a deeply tragic outcome. Like, it's like, once this happened to them, a happy ending was impossible for any of these characters. Like, that was taken from them at a very young age. And so, like, the fact that this is a happy ending, but like is actually horrifyingly tragic, is also deeply sad. Like, it's a pretty profound and affecting ending for the film to have. So they have this moment together, all of them together in the bar. They're having a great time. It's like they're kids again. And Shakes explains in the narration that it's the last time they're ever all together. So Michael, he quits being a lawyer and he moves to the English countryside and becomes a carpenter. Shakes is promoted to a reporter trainee from like whatever newsboy position he had before, and he stays in Hell's Kitchen. John dies the next year of alcohol poisoning, and Tommy is also killed the next year by rival gangsters. Carol, she stays in Hell's Kitchen, and he says she never marries, but she does have a son, and she names him John Thomas Michael Martinez, her last name, and calls him Shakes. So she honors
rolls right off the tongue.
Well, Shakes does with the name, and that's the end of the film. That's the end. That is Sleepers. What'd you think, Mike?
Great recap. Yeah, let's get into our final ratings. You want me to go first?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, I'm solid with mine, so you're not going to affect me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also solid with mine. I am giving Sleepers 3.5 out of 5 stars. Yep. How do you feel about that?
I think it's low. You'll hear it when I give my my summary and score. Yep.
I like it. It's a good film. Yep. Absolutely. I think there are some big flaws to it. So the big parallel that I kept thinking about, the Alto Nights, when we watched the Alto Nights and we discussed it, that's a 2-hour-long movie that to me I thought, oh, this feels like it was patched together in post via narration because there's so much constant narration over the course of that 2-hour-long film. But then we watched Sleepers from 1996, a much longer film. You know, it seems like Barry Levinson and the creative team were able to do what they set out to accomplish in creating this film. But it still over relies on narration. I think they really overemploy it to the point where it's kind of grating and is filling in gaps that at times I think either didn't need to be filled in via narration or could have been shown via character interaction over the course of this 2.5-hour long film. I will say, I do think it was a really smart creative choice to not show any of Father Bobby's deliberation when it comes to his decision to testify, because how could they do that justice? But yeah, too reliant on narration. It's an interesting movie because it's kind of I just thought it was a really interesting combination of 3 different types of films that all felt a little derivative. And I think I really liked the first hour of the film the most. I think that the gang as children were really well established. The world and setting were so well established. My enjoyment of the film kind of dropped once we get that time jump to the 80s and the gang being adults. I'm not sure how I would remedy that because it's like a structural flaw to the film.
The narrative, right? Yeah, it's like the point.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder, although as much as I liked the first act with them as kids, I wonder if I would have liked the film more overall if the narrative was more focused. It was, predominantly focused on the characters as adults, and we kind of jump back
with the kids, like just to establish the events. Yeah.
Right. Maybe there's a long flashback in the beginning, or we kind of intersperse those flashbacks so that the events that happen when they're kids inform the narrative. There's, again, it's like poetry, it rhymes. It's like that sort of situation, but it doesn't really feel like that. It feels a little disjointed to me, and the courtroom drama stuff didn't really do it for me as much as the first act, especially, but the first hour or so of the film. So that's why it's getting a 3.5 for me. Good film, definitely recommend it, but I kind of feel like we've seen these things done before. What about you? What do you give it?
I don't agree or don't disagree with anything that you just said. I think it's all totally fair. I do think that this is a flawed film, but I think that I see the polls a little differently than you do. So for me, I love this movie so much that like the flaws that you describe, I think you see them as like diminishing it from great to good, and I think I see them as diminishing it from perfect to great. For me, this is a 4.5 star. I love this movie. I think it's my favorite movie that we've watched so far for the podcast.
It is your highest rated.
Yep, pretty solidly. I would be extremely surprised if it was not in my top 20 at the end of the podcast. I loved this movie. I found it tremendously emotionally affecting. I described in sort of my initial framing at the beginning that this film, the way it is sentimental, the way it's shot, the warmth of it, the way that it uses its sound design to evoke emotion, at least done effectively, is like really a product of kind of like the mid 80s through the late 90s in filmmaking in a way that made me feel very nostalgic for movies that I liked when I was a kid, like 80s and 90s movies that I watched growing up. And like, yeah, I mean, with the exception of the narration, it's kind of a technical marvel, right? Like it's well shot. It has great sound design. John Williams' score is amazing. The performances are incredible. Like there is not a poorly delivered line in this entire movie. Everyone is doing just like really bang up work. Even Dustin Hoffman, whose mumbliness I think is like a part of the character, and his like feeling of insecurity and uncertainty being back in the courtroom in this kind of high stakes situation. And, it's a Robert De Niro podcast. So I think it is important for me to consider the way that I feel about Robert De Niro as an important contributor to the context of the way I think about a film we're watching for this podcast. And this is like, I don't know, it's probably the best Robert De Niro movie we've watched so far, right? Like in terms of like how important like the centrality and compellingness of his character in the narrative, how much screen time he gets, how effective his performance is. To your point, like he does like incredible face acting in this movie. I talked about this a little bit. Like we see in the character of Father Bobby, the two of, I think, the three primary types of character he plays, right? So there's three like types of character Robert De Niro plays. We've seen all of them, I think, so far in the podcast. So there's like Jack Burns, Meet the Parents style, like comedy goofball. There's like sort of warm, like caring, nurturing guy like the doctor in Melvin's Room. And then there's like gangster tough guy like Al Capone in The Untouchables. And we see him play like the doctor from Melvin's Room, like nice caring
Dr.
guy in
Wally.
this movie, and Al Capone. Like we also see him be like the tough guy, like gangster sort. And it's a very like, it's just a very dynamic performance by De Niro. It's definitely my favorite performance of his that we've seen so far for the podcast. And like, yeah, I loved this movie. I don't know. Like, I think if it weren't for your flaws, I'd have given it 5 stars, honestly. I really liked it. Yep. This is my favorite experience I've had watching a movie for this podcast so
Really?
far. By far. Yep.
Wow.
It felt long, though. It feels really long.
It is, and it did.
But it carried me through the narrative. You know, like I loved all these characters. I don't know. Yeah, this movie really worked for me. This is the kind of thing that really works for me. This is my kind of movie. So there we go. That's my first like really high rating for the podcast, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't given anything else a really high rating.
No, I think that's a totally valid review of the film. I think for me, I think what was keeping it from that tier was just, I wish the adult characters were more fleshed out. We spend so much time in the court. Yep. Yeah. I think that's the only thing that kind of killed it for me narratively, but otherwise, very good film.
Yep. Loved it. Glad we watched it. Yeah. First movie we've watched that I think I really loved, honestly. So I'm pumped because there's obviously going to be at least like 15 more that make us feel that way. And like for each of us, right. Depending on our tastes. And like, it's just so fun when we get them. Like I finished that movie and I was like, I'm so happy that this podcast made me watch that. Like I would never
Power of Cinema.
Watch that.
Never even heard of it.
So cool. Like I'd never even heard of it. Like I love that movie. Like it's like an instant, like I love it for me. Incredible experience.
That is
so
really
happy we're
cool.
doing this podcast. Yep. All right. You got a recommendation?
Yeah, I went back and forth between 2 different films, but I think I have to do it. And honestly, I suspect it might be your recommendation as well. We've talked about it a couple of times. I've dunked on it a couple of times, but I am, in all sincerity, recommending the 2024 film Nickel Boys.
That's a great recommendation. It won't be mine.
It's not yours? I'm kind of shocked, man.
I'm going in a totally different direction. I'm going in a more you-style direction with my recommendation.
Oh, that's exciting.
That's an awesome recommendation.
Inverting.
Talk about it a little bit. Why should people watch it?
It's a very similar kind of film. This is a film that came out last year. It's a historical drama film based on the novel of the same name from 2019, directed by Ramel Ross. And so this is about two African-American boys named Elwood and Turner who were sent to an abusive reform school in 1960s Florida. It is also inspired by a real place, at least. I don't know the level of historical accuracy. What makes this film interesting, just from a technical perspective, is that it is shot in first person, which I dunked on a couple of times in previous episodes, but is a really cool idea. It's so innovative and unique that I think that deserves some commendation. I think I found it a little distracting at some points, but there were other sequences of the film that I thought were really powerful and enhanced by that choice to film in first person. So I don't want to say it's similar to Sleepers, but it's dealing with similar issues. And so it would make a very nice companion to that film. Really well done, great performances. The relationship between the two main characters is really, it's beautiful and tragic, and we do see one of the characters at multiple points in his life as he's trying to expose, he's trying to go through his own process of exposing the school and all of the atrocities that it committed. So yeah, I just think it makes total sense to recommend here, and I feel I owe it to the film after dunking on it. It's a really good film. It's really good. It's creative. I think it's absolutely worth watching, and I understand why it got so much awards buzz last year.
Yeah, it was a Best Picture nominee last year, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah, that's why we watched it.
Rightfully so. It was certainly one of the 10 best new films I watched from 2024. I think it was very rightfully nominated.
Definitely.
The Voice is great. Really, 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 really good movie. Really cool. And I agree. The decision, right? Like, obviously, as a narrative frame, first person is very common, in novels, and the written word. But it is a lot rarer, I think, due to the difficulty of its implementation in film. And it is well implemented in this film. Like, it's cool. It really changes the way you see the events, given that you are always seeing them from one of the people who is being victimized in the film. It's really, really cool. All right, my recommendation could not possibly be any more different from yours.
Austin Powers and Goldmember.
For this week, I am going to honor the fact that really early in the podcast, we have now seen every one of the 1996 Robert De Niro movies. So I am instead going to pay homage to the year 1996, which is the year that one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, and what I would say relatively confidently is one of the greatest movies of all time, was released. And it is the Coen Brothers 1996 film Fargo.
Wow.
God. Fargo is such a masterpiece. Like, oh my God.
It really went a different direction.
Yeah. It's just like, if you've never seen Fargo, you should really watch it. Like, I don't know. It has incredible performances. It's tight, right? Fargo's short. I think it's under an hour and 40 minutes long. It's like a black comedy crime caper, but it has, I think, it has that Coen Brothers vantage point. I think this is their best film. So it's really them at their best. This kind of ironically detached, but still very, I think, emotionally attuned way of seeing the humanity and the tragedy and the profundity in comedy, right? And also seeing the comedy in things that are not funny. There is a lot of violence and a lot of evil in Fargo, but it is an incredibly funny movie. It's probably one of my favorite comedies of all time. But, you also see the nobility of small town police detective work, right? You see the corrosive power of money, but in contrast, how ennobling eschewing those kinds of material things can be, and the clarity of purpose and the moral clarity that you can find in believing and serving something other than your own enrichment. And it's super well shot, and Steve Buscemi's in it, and it's like one of his funniest performances of all time. Like he plays such a funny character in the movie. Like everything he says is quotable. I say half of the Steve Buscemi lines from the movie in my life. Like, man, like something that like my parents really said all the time when I was a kid. That is from Fargo that I like didn't realize until I was a teenager when I watched it is I'm not here to debate you, Jerry. In the scene where they're in the bar and like Jerry is arguing with Steve Buscemi and his criminal counterpart, whose actor I can't remember, about like I think the price of the car, and Steve Buscemi's just like, I'm not here to fucking debate you, Jerry. I'm not here to debate you. It's so funny. Like anytime I would have an argument with my parents growing up, they would just be like, I'm not here to debate you, Jerry.
It's really good.
It's an endlessly quotable movie. It is tremendously compelling. It's expertly shot. It's very funny. It is an unrepentant 5-star from me. One of my favorite movies of all time. And if you've never seen Fargo, you should watch it because it's a 1996 classic.
I completely agree. I didn't watch Fargo for the first time until March 2023. And it was an easy 4.5-star film for me. So, and honestly, it might be a 5-star when I watch it again. So I think that's a great recommendation.
I've seen it like 10 times. I doubt I would have given it 5 stars the first time I ever saw it. All right. And there was our discussion on sleepers. So it is time to roll. It's your turn this week, Mike. Why don't you take it away?
All right. Here's hoping it's Silver Linings Playbook, right?
Yep. I appreciate it. Got to stick together.
All right. I'm going to roll the dice right now. And I rolled 24. Angel Heart. Never heard of it.
Also never heard of it.
Angel Heart.
It's the year I was born.
Angel Heart is
1996, the year I was born.
Angel Heart is a 1987 neo-noir psychological horror film, an adaptation of William Hjortsberg's 1978 novel Falling Angel. Wow, written and directed by Alan Parker and stars Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, Lisa Bonet, and Charlotte Rampling. Okay, I guess next week we'll be watching Angel Heart.
Sounds great. I'm excited.
I guess I am too. I've never heard of this film before in my life, so could be fun. I'm going to choose to be optimistic here.
You and me both, sister. Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. It's been a great discussion. A little heavier than usual, I think, but we get the movies we get, right? I would like to thank you, Mike, for being my co-host in this podcast.
Right back at you.
There you go, Mike, back at you. And I would like to thank you, our loyal listeners and citizens of De Niro Nation. As ever, I would like to invite you to write to us at ourherodeniro@gmail.com and to follow Mike Mike and I on Letterboxd. His username is Mike Back At You. Mine is Mike the Fab. I would like to thank my lovely wife, Caroline, aka Bad Cree, for drawing this podcast's beautiful art. And I did that in a weird order, so I feel it's off, but that's everything, right?
I think that's everything. Yeah, you Rochambeau'd
not the order I usually do it in. So yeah, there you go. Really awkward way to go out because I switched the order up for some reason. But yeah, great week this week, and we look forward to chatting with you all again next week for what is it? Angel Heart. Angel Heart.
I just had a very funny realization. You know how sometimes you just say like the incorrect thing, you don't realize that you've been saying wrong. I think for the last few weeks, whenever you do things non-linearly in your recaps or whatever, I've been saying that you have Rochambeau'd it. But I really mean to say is you Rashomon it. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, I don't.
Rashomon is an incredibly famous Japanese film that is told with like a non-linear narrative. I think Rochambeau is rock, paper, scissors. So I think I might just continue calling it Rochambeauing it. I think that's just part of the podcast lexicon now.
Our hero De Niroism right there, right?
Yeah, that's for whoever listened to the end. You know, you get to understand why I'm going to keep using that from now on.